Why did you leave California to come to the Netherlands? That's the most common question that I get. And I tell people to pursue the Dutch dream. Dear Diary, it's been 5 years in the Netherlands. 5 years ago, I was lost, struggling to find a career, struggling to find myself. I spent all my life trying to achieve this American dream that my immigrant parents had worked so hard to provide for me and my sister. But something was missing. And then this idea kept coming back. Europe. I always met Europeans while traveling and thought, do they even work? How do they have all this time? But they also told me about a different way of living. A life where everyone gets 5 weeks of vacation and takes them. A life with affordable healthcare and education for all. So I researched, and the Netherlands kept coming up. As one of the happiest countries in the world, fluent English speakers, bicycles, and high-quality study programs in English. And then I thought, maybe I could go back to school. And so I applied, I got in, and I found my way into the land of the Dutch to study in a small fairy tale town called Maastricht. It was a beautiful 1-year experience. I loved the program, I loved the city. And then I graduated and I excitedly moved to Amsterdam for a new job and a new life. And then
COVID-19.
Europe is now the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis.
well, I decided to stick it out. And 5 years later, I'm still here. So let me tell you 5 reasons why I'm still here in the Netherlands. Well, sometimes I do have to question myself, especially during these dark winters. Why did I leave California to come here? Because to be honest, the Netherlands is great, but it's not perfect. It's not all tulips and sunshine. Especially the winters, they are depressing. But when it comes to living in a country for an extended period of time, it's not just the weather, but there are other factors, social, economic, societal, systemic factors that contribute a lot to one's happiness. That's actually what all these happiness reports measure. And overall, I do think that the pros far outweigh the cons in this country. And a big one in the Netherlands is balance, or what I like to call time over money. Now, I'm very grateful for the US and my heart still stays there in many ways, but being away for 5 years, I do see that back in the US, there's an overly big focus on chasing more money, more status, more fame. And I do think that can be dangerous if you're just chasing more and more and you're never satisfied with just enough. And I do get it because it's a system that favors those that have more. And for me, I almost didn't stay in the Netherlands because I almost decided to go back to San Francisco because I compared the salaries between San Francisco and Amsterdam, and I would be making a lot more money in San Francisco. But that's really the mindset. It's about a number. It's about making more. And what I've come to really appreciate about the Netherlands is while money is important, it's about balance. Balance so that you can have more time. People leave work at 5 p.m. People have 5-6 weeks of vacation and they take them. People don't work outside of work hours. There's no expectation to answer emails on vacation. And a lot of people do work part-time. In fact, that was a surprise to me that the Netherlands has the shortest work week in the world because people decide to work 4 days a week, 3 days a week. And it really took me a while to recondition this mindset of having less money in order to have more time. But in the Netherlands, from a practical perspective, you get taxed 50% of your income above 70K. And so there really isn't a big incentive for people to make more. People would rather make less so that they can have more time and less stress in their lives. Because you can live quite comfortably with an average income in the Netherlands. So that allows people to focus more of their time on things that they value, such as vacation, family, hobbies, volunteering. And it reminds me of this quote: when you're young, you have time, you have health, but you have no money. When you're middle-aged, you have money and you have health, but you have no time. When you're old, you have money and you have time, but you have no health. But the Dutch way of living is instead of making the most money, it's about being okay with just enough. And that's what really living to work instead of working to live really means. And a big thing is the system supports it. A social safety net. Now, before coming to the Netherlands, I had only heard about such a term, but now I understand what it means. The Dutch system provides security and stability for people so that they don't end up on the streets. So there's less fear of being homeless or needing to pay 100K on a hospital bill. Let me share some examples that I've seen, experienced, or that those around me have experienced over the years. The past year has been a big year of layoffs, and I know colleagues in the US and also here that have been laid off. Now, in the US, you can get laid off or fired at any time, gone the next day, and often without money or severance. And because healthcare is so expensive and is usually tied to your job, then it becomes stressful and expensive when you need to take care of healthcare without a job. Now, in the Netherlands, of course you can still get laid off. That's how businesses work, but it's a lot harder, especially if you have a permanent contract. And I know of several people that have been laid off, but it took them time to negotiate a severance package. And often you will get at least a few months of severance. You're not going to get let go the next day. And when it comes to healthcare, it's affordable on your own. It costs 100, 200 euros a month. And if you make below a certain income, the government will give you money to pay for healthcare. Another right that I've seen and pleasantly surprised by is the right to be sick. Wait, shouldn't that be a universal right? Unfortunately, that's not the case around the world, but it is the case here. If you're sick, say on burnout or mental health or a disease, you're protected by the law, say up to 2 years, and you will still get paid. For example, burnout. I had never heard the term before coming to the Netherlands. Then I heard of so many cases of people being burnt out once, twice, 3 times, and people were so open in admitting that. Now I've learned it's not because there are more cases here compared to the rest of the world. It's because the law protects people and people are open to admit it. In the US and in Asia, I know of family members, friends who were fired from their jobs because they were sick long term, because they had cancer. And that's so messed up because we as humans will get sick. But the difference here is that the law protects you. And let me quickly touch upon physical safety. I think that's a very important part when living in a country. I've never felt unsafe living in this country. For example, the homeless problem. Of course there are homeless people in the Netherlands, but you just don't see them roaming around the streets, living in tents, doing drugs. It's a concern and a worry for the safety of my parents walking around in the streets. That's something that you don't have to worry about here in a big city in the Netherlands. And another one is safety for your children. And I wasn't fully aware of this specific topic until talking to a few American parents who are raising their kids here. And they told me now they don't have to fear for their children going to school due to mass school shootings. That really is the unfortunate reality. And of course, it doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen in the US because of gun violence. Another one is education, and let me tell you why. Because in the Netherlands, you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to put yourself or your family through education. I was talking to this American family, parents, and they have 3 kids in high school. And they told me that they could not afford to put their kids through college in the US. It would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars. They would have had to go into debt. But here in the Netherlands, they only have to pay a few thousand euros in tuition per year per student. And I can relate to that as well because that was the big reason I decided to study here instead of the US, because the cost of education here is a lot lower than the US. And that's a big difference because in the US, debt is unfortunately part of the life of an American. And debt is crippling. It can create a lot of fear in one's life, not a lot of stability, because you know in the back of your mind, you need to pay off your debt. And this is what a safety net feels like because life is gonna throw you a curveball, but I know that I won't be on the streets. Another thing that has contributed a lot to my happiness in this country is there's less of a need to compare yourself socially. There are less expectations as compared to other cultures. I come from the US and also an Asian culture where you're conditioned to try to be better than the others, to compare yourself
to have a timeline of expectations. You need to be this, you need to have this at this certain age. And it's very freeing because when you don't feel the need to have something, to compare yourself as much, then you're more free to be happy and to enjoy your life. A Dutch saying that I've come to really appreciate is the doe normaal saying, or to act normal. And you're taught here not to brag, and that's very different compared to the US, where Americans are great at bragging. One thing is I've stopped asking people what they do for work. I've also stopped expecting people to ask me what I do for work, because I was conditioned to judge others based on this external label of what someone did for work, the school they went to. It's very freeing when you don't need to judge others based on these external labels, and you can get to know someone for who they really are. I was talking to a Polish friend the other day as well, and she told me it's been very freeing for her to come to a country where there aren't these social pressures to get married or to have a family, and some people don't have that opportunity. And I also feel the same way. I come from this Asian culture where I'm expected by this age to be married, to have kids. When you don't have these expectations, that creates a lot more room for happiness to flourish within myself, and so I'm very thankful for that. I also live a healthier lifestyle here in the Netherlands, and that's due to design. Well, biking culture. Of course I knew about bikes before coming here, but I didn't realize how big of a role it would play in my life here, because people here cycle 10 to 20 kilometers every week. You cycle to the supermarket, to the office, to the train stations. It's become my main mode of transportation, and it's like killing two birds with one stone, because before, when I lived in the US, I would drive to my local gym in order to cycle. Now I cycle in order to get from point A to point B. And I also walk a lot more too. It's a very walkable country. Everything is quite small. And food and nutrition have become important topics in my life now. As I get older, I realize my metabolism isn't as high anymore, so I have to watch what I eat. But the nice thing about the Netherlands is there is less temptation as compared to the US in terms of fast food. Back home in the US, I used to eat a lot of fast food, believe it or not, more than I wanted to. I had these cravings late at night, and I would grab a snack from the local McDonald's or Del Taco. But here, you don't have as many of those temptations. It's not as easy. And if there's something I've learned about behavioral science and psychology, is if you want to change behaviors for the better, for example, changing your diet, a big part of it is changing your environment. And here, the environment, there isn't as many temptations for things like fast food. And the food that you buy in the supermarkets, it's healthier. For one, due to EU regulations, there are less highly processed foods here in the Netherlands as compared to the US. There's also less variety, less options, so I don't have as many choices to choose from, which is a good thing for me because I have a sweet tooth. And one thing that I've learned about is the Netherlands is the second biggest exporter of agriculture behind the US. And that means the supermarket food and produce is actually quite high quality and affordable. And lastly, I've really learned to slow down over the past few years of living here. I mean, I used to live my life in a faster lane, you could say. I was going at 100, 120 miles per hour. But here I've learned that you can go 30, 40 miles per hour and cruise. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. I still remember my first few years here. I was frustrated at how slow things were, how slow things happen, say, in the workplace. But slowly, colleagues taught me that things don't need to be done now. They can wait, and it's really about working and living smarter, not faster. And that's something that I've come to appreciate, being able to live more in the present moment, to enjoy life now instead of the future, because my mind used to live very far in the future, making money for retirement. Life happens, and due to some unfortunate circumstances, I've had some people in my life die young, and that made me realize how important time is, that this future of ours is not certain. and it's taught me to live more in the present moment. And that's what the system here and the culture here really allows one to do, to live more in the present moment. That life shouldn't be lived like a sprint, but more like a marathon.
Dear Diary, it's been 5 years in the Netherlands, and it's going well. But what's next? Well, I don't really know, and I'm okay with that, because you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way.